the definition of anti-Semitism can necessarily change. Is that correct?
It's not just my belief. It is the commonly accepted understanding in both the Jewish and academic worlds.
Okay.
This isn't, okay? As I said, that's why I quoted, this is a quote. It's a great thing from Lord Sachs, Jonathan Sachs. It's a great thing from Nihilecka. This is just accepted as understanding of, I call it anthropologists.
So I would just say off the bat, I do not accept that definitions can just mutate. That is something that I could debate that on, like the definition of a woman. I mean, and I'm saying not just about Jewish people. I think that we have to have a concrete definition to work with, because then you can just update and say, actually, I've changed that, and now this is what constitutes anti-Semitism.
But Candace, that is the horror of anti-Semitism. But the first piece is to have a mutual understanding of what is anti-Semitism. I think that would help a tremendous amount.
I actually totally agree with you on that. That is a perfect place to start. Could you provide for us a definition of anti-Semitism?
Absolutely. I really appreciate that, because I think that is the break. If we're not speaking the same language, where can we go, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a man, a blessed memory man named Lord Jonathan Sachs. He was the chief rabbi of England. He had a great mind. He really defined anti-Semitism. That anti-Semitism is Jews have no right to exist collectively as Jews with the same rights as other human beings. Which is kind of a weird statement. So let's just track back to understand the history of anti-Semitism. 2,000 years ago, Jews don't accept Jesus as Messiah.
If you could just give us what you are saying the current definition of anti-Semitism is today, that would be very helpful.
The current definition of anti-Semitism today has to do with what the feelings are. It has to do with anti-Zionism, number one. That is a definition. Anti-Zionism, anti-Israel is anti-Semitism.
Okay.
This isn't
so you believe that Jewish people, if you could just give us what...
All right, let's get to it. So a while ago, this man, Michael Barclay, wrote an article calling this woman, Candace Owens, a Jew-hating bigot and an anti-Semite. Candace Owens brought him on her show, I'm gonna say, to confront him and clarify some things, while Barclay was trying to, I guess, educate her, get her to apologize, and ask her to watch a movie. The entire exchange was nearly 2 hours with neither side willing to budge, but what I'm kind of stuck on is this definition of anti-Semitism. Candace Owens has been critical and maybe controversial on a lot, but she wasn't fired from Daily Wire until she criticized the Israeli government. While explaining the definition, Michael Barclay even said that criticizing Zionism can be deemed anti-Semitic. It's common knowledge that anti means against or opposed to, so I was kind of waiting on Barclay to tell us what's a Semite. Oddly enough, he never got around to it. Now, George Orwell said that the great enemy of clear language is insincerity. And how sincere is a word that can mutate meanings and be explained without ever addressing the etymology? So to begin with, individuals holding stereotypes and having disdain for other groups precedes recorded history. We call that racism or bigotry. Simple enough. But the first specific word for the hatred of Jews was the German term Judenhass, a compound word that literally combines Jew and hate. Okay, that seems simple too. In 1879, Wilhelm Marr invented the term anti-Semitism. He believed in the then popular pseudoscience of biological racism and decided that the Jews in his society belonged to the race of Semites and not whatever race the other Germans were. Now, some context matters here. Germany had only been unified for 8 years. Nationalism was on the rise. Ethnic Germans were mostly Christian. Jewish families had lived in Germany for generations. They spoke the same language, attended the schools, and they lived life seemingly socially integrated with them. But by branding them as a different race made them appear more as outsiders. And so Marr's term anti-Semitism caught on. But here's the strange part. The term Semite was already in use long before Marr. It originally referred to descendants of Noah's son Shem from the Bible. And I can kind of see it. Shem plus Ite, like how the Old Testament uses the suffix Ite to designate tribes and genealogy. By the late 18th century, Semitic became a linguistic label for languages mostly spoken across North Africa, East Africa, and the Middle East. Languages like Amharic, Arabic, Hebrew, and Aramaic. Okay, that makes sense because those are the areas where the Shemites or Semitic people migrated to and lived. But now we have our first problem. The Jews Mar targeted didn't speak Hebrew, Arabic, or any Semitic language. They spoke Yiddish, a Germanic language, not a Semitic language. Today, it's generally accepted that the Ashkenazi Jews Mar knew were descended from Semites through marriage and conversion, despite being generations, maybe even centuries separated from them. But by intentionally warping the definition of Semite from something linguistic and cultural into something racial, steers Mar's word towards becoming a misnomer and less accurate, I guess. However, Mar's new term fit the mood. It dressed up old hate and modern vocabulary by inventing a new word for the sake of nationalism. So that leaves us another question. Who is an actual Semite by its old and current definition? It's not hard to find out, and its current use seems dangerously insincere when you do. Today, there are over 380 million speakers of actual Semitic languages, and even more if you're going to count all the descendants of ancient Semitic languages like Ashkenazi Jews. Yet, when we talk about anti-Semitism, we're only talking about Jews, who number around 15 million worldwide. They're only 4% of Semitic people. That feels incredibly narrow, almost misleading. Day-to-day hate of non-Israeli or non-Jewish Semitic people are never classified as anti-Semitism. You may hear something like Islamophobia or xenophobia, but like Jews, Arabic-speaking Muslims don't make up all Semitic people. But how are they and other Semites denied the privilege of Semitic distinction when they represent so much more than the 4% minority? Like imagine this. Countries like the UK or France with large immigrant communities from North Africa and the Middle East. Imagine if those countries' immigration challenges were scrutinized as an anti-Semitism challenge. The conversation would change overnight. Likewise, the stereotypes given to East Africans. Matter of fact, there are Jewish communities in Ethiopia and places like Yemen today that actually practices a form of Judaism that's over 2,000 to 3,000 years old. It doesn't seem to get much more Jewish than that. On the ADL's website, they have an actual glossary defining anti-Semitism and other articles that educate us towards their use of the term. I see no mention or defense of these other groups as Semites in any of the definitions to describe mistreatment that they may experience. The 11 examples of anti-Semitism on the IHRA's website focuses only on the experience of European Jews in the Israeli government. You can check it out for yourself. Typically, when we're taught about peak anti-Semitism, we're immediately reminded of the horrors of the Nazi regime. The world needs to know about that. Those crimes are just as important to never forget as the atrocities committed against all Semitic peoples historically. During Italy's occupation of Ethiopia, at least 375,000 Ethiopians were killed due to starvation, massacres, and even in concentration camps. This is going on at the same time as the Holocaust. A couple decades later, the Algerian War for Independence saw up to 1.5 million Algerians dead at the hands of the French. These are Semitic peoples too, and only just 2 countries. This now got me wondering if in the 20th century altogether, did a comparably similar number of Semites die in Africa and the Middle East under other European occupations like that in Nazi Europe? And let's not forget about the present. The UN and Human Rights Watch have been calling the condition of Yemen one of the world's worst humanitarian crises for several years. Millions are suffering while the Saudi government continues its military campaign against the Houthis. Meanwhile, the Jewish community there has nearly vanished. One report stating that only 4 Jews remain. Again, a Semitic population, a Jewish population that has literally been there since before Jesus, seemingly facing local extinction. but no one invokes anti-Semitism to bring awareness to this. And that raises another question. Since anti-Semitism doesn't seem to be about all Semites or even all Jews, does it mostly serve as a form of Israeli exceptionalism? Because if I just rely on the IHRA definition, any foreign policy dissent directed towards the Israeli government can be conflated into some type of hate speech. So far, it seems that this language of protection is shaped more by preferential history and political influence, and shaped less by logic and, do I dare say, inclusivity. If we're going to give so much power to the term anti-Semitism, it should either apply to all Semitic peoples, or we need to reconsider the term altogether. Of course, this isn't to deny the harmful persecution Israeli Jews have faced and allegedly still go through today. However, the further we go, this selective use, whether intentional or accidental, is only breeding more distrust towards institutions that gatekeep the language. And speaking of distrust, check this out. University protests across the USA have been largely criminalized as anti-Semitic. But at Columbia College, the Justice Department wants to charge some protesters with terrorism because, according to them, their actions directly support Hamas somehow. But it's not like these college protests are some type of isolated fringe movement. Since the 2023 Israeli retaliation to Hamas, 60 countries joined South Africa's genocide case against Israel. Even Canada, France, and the UK announced their intention to recognize Palestine's independence regardless of the Israeli government's wishes. Now, are these governments anti-Semitic too? And let's not forget that in Tel Aviv, over 500,000 people in a country of just 10 million were protesting their own government because they refused a ceasefire that Hamas agreed to. Am I wrong to say that, according to the ADL's definition or any other Israeli sympathizers, that the Israeli government just had the largest anti-Semitic demonstration ever? And let's not forget, these Palestinians are Semitic people too. Meanwhile, musicians, activists, commentators such as Candace Owens face being blackballed or deplatformed over anti-Semitic accusations. Have they reinforced some type of stereotype or incited hatred? That's debatable. But ask yourself this. Has any of the 4% Semitic Jewish minority been physically harmed or placed in immediate danger from Candace Owens' political views or some type of comment? Compare that with what we see live stream every day. The carcasses of children and families being pulled out of rubble. Families forced to evacuate, living in tents. Aid centers targeted by gunfire and airstrikes. Even journalists being killed. All at the behest of the Israeli government. How is saying what you're clearly seeing hateful or harmful? Since April 2025, Homeland Security announced that it will begin monitoring the social media activity of non-citizens, including foreign students and green card applicants, for any type of signs of anti-Semitic behavior or even comments. In addition to this, the ADL uses surveillance to profile U.S. citizens, labeling them anti-Semitic, while they still operate as a national lobby group and cooperate with local law enforcement. This reminds me more and more of the 1950s, when McCarthyism and the Red Scare propagated a communist witch hunt. McCarthyism didn't just target ideology, it weaponized suspicion. Careers were ruined, voices silent, and truth was buried beneath so much accusation. Policing Israeli exceptionalism under the guise of anti-Semitism shows signs of being a similar witch hunt. Once a term for ethnic hatred, now functions in many cases just as a tool of political suppression. And let's be honest, when a word applies to only 4% of a group while ignoring the concerns of millions in the 96%, then we have to ask, do people like Michael Barclay use clear, sincere language? Or is this some type of social linguistic gaslight? Like McCarthyism, peaceful, nonviolent political dissent is being criminalized. But unlike McCarthyism, it seems it's for the sake of a foreign government and not even the USA. Earlier, I mentioned how Wilhelm Marr invented a word for the sake of promoting nationalism and exclusion. The definition didn't make sense back then, and it still doesn't now. However, we clearly see it's still serving the same purpose, and that's warping language for the sake of nationalism. The real debate shouldn't be about who is and who isn't anti-Semitic, but is this even an honest word with an honest definition? Candace Owens mentioned that we live in a world where even the definition of a woman can be altered by some groups, and she refused to abide by those definitions. When it comes to dystopian language, George Orwell said that what is above all needed is to let the meaning choose the word and not the other way around. The worst thing you can do with words is to just surrender to them. So are we supposed to surrender to whatever definition of anti-Semitism that's given to us? If you made it this far, we highly appreciate it. Daily Wire took down a full interview, but I'll leave a link to it up. Let me know what you think overall though. Is this an honest word with a sincere use? Does it need another update? Are there any holes you want to fill in that I left out? Tell me in the comments, like it, share it, and subscribe to stay on board. It's been real.